Have you ever come close to death? Maybe you've almost been hit by a vehicle while crossing the road, or been on an airplane that needed to make an emergency landing due to a malfunction. Many people only have one close encounter in their lives, but what about someone that has had multiple brushes with death? But not just different close calls, but three of the same exact near-death experiences. Each incident just as crazy as the other. This is the story of Violet Jessop. Also known as Miss Unsinkable, or the Queen of Sinking Ships, Violet Jessop was born October 2nd, 1887 in Bahia Blanca, Argentina, as the oldest of 9 children to Irish immigrant parents. Being the oldest of 9, Violet often helped look after her siblings while her parents worked. Her first brush with death came early on as a child when she was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Doctors claimed she wouldn't survive more than a few weeks, but to everyone's surprise, she would overcome the deadly disease. When she was 16, her family would move to England after her father passed away. Her mother would find a job as a stewardess while Violet would attend school. A few years later, Violet's mother's health would decline, so Violet, following in her mother's footsteps, would become a stewardess on the same boat, and later the famous White Star Line, setting her up for a future of events no one would have ever expected. On September 20th, 1911, the RMS Olympic set sail from Southampton, but that trip would only last mere minutes as the Navy ship HMS Hawk would strike the starboard side of the Olympic. Thankfully, due to the HMS Hawk being a smaller naval ship, it didn't cause more damage than it did. The Hawk ripped a hole in the Olympic, flooding 2 of its lower compartments. The Olympic was able to make it back to port and would be out of commission for repairs. While this wasn't a major disaster, it very well could have been. Violet would work on the ship for a few more months before boarding its sister ship, the RMS Titanic. Violet reluctantly joined the Titanic's maiden voyage on April 10, 1912. She enjoyed working on the Olympic and did not want to transfer to a new ship, but she listened to her friends and transferred for this monumental occasion. In just 4 days, she would come to regret that decision. Just before midnight on April 14th, the most famous maritime disaster would occur. The unsinkable Titanic would hit an iceberg and would sink just 2.5 hours later, taking the lives of 68% of those on board. During the events, Violet and the other stewardesses received orders to assist women and children into boats before getting into a boat herself. Before her boat was lowered into the water, an officer handed her a random baby and asked her to look after it. Hours later, Violet and the other lifeboats were rescued by the RMS Carpathia. As shocking as it sounds, this isn't her scariest brush with death. In 1916, during the midst of World War I, Violet was serving as a stewardess for the British Red Cross on the HMHS Britannic. The sister ship of the previously mentioned ships was turned into a mobile hospital to aid in the war efforts. In November of 1916, the Britannic hit a German naval mine off the coast of Greece, causing it to sink and take the lives of 30 crew members. This would be her closest call with death, as she was sucked under and almost hit by the ship's propeller. As per her memoir, "I leapt into the water but was sucked under the ship's keel, which struck my head. I escaped, but years later when I went to my doctor because of a lot of headaches, he discovered I had once sustained a fracture of the skull." You would think that after 3 close calls within a span of 5 years that one would be deterred from ever stepping on another boat again. But not the unsinkable Violet Jessop. She would go on to continue working in the industry for another 30 years without any more brushes with death or any incidences remotely close to these. Whether you think she was unlucky or unfortunate to work on these 3 ships, one thing is for certain. She survived the curse of the White Star Line luxury liners. I'm Mr. Reed.